Computapes Excel Video 3, changing the format of columns, rows, and cells. There are two ways to change the column width. You may move the cursor, the mouse pointer, right in between the two row headings and then click and drag to increase the width of the column to the left. You may move the mouse pointer back to between the column headings, click and drag, and squash the column thinner. You can adjust any column to the thickness that you choose, or the width that you choose, and the mouse helpful hint tip will tell you the measurement of the width that you're spreading out the column or squashing down the column, depending on what you need. You may also notice if you click the Home tab and move all the way to the right of the ribbon, there's a group called Cells that allows you to format the column width. If I choose a particular column, for example, I make the active cell Q3, and I choose Format, and I choose Column Width, I can type in a specific number as the measurement of the column width. So if I type in 20 units, all of a sudden column Q becomes 20 units. And I could always squash it back the other way, and I could always reformat it again by typing in the specific number of units that you want the column width to be, or at least the active column. And I'm going to click Undo. Now, you can change the format or change the width of several columns in a row. If you click and drag the mouse pointer across several columns and lift your finger up, you'll notice that several rows are selected. That means that if I change the format now, columns N through V will have the new measurement. So again, in the Home tab, in the Cells group, I click Format, and I click Column Width, and now if I type in the number 20 and I click OK, you can see all of the columns that were selected when I highlighted the columns with the click and drag motion have become 20 units long. They're still selected, so I can make them only 10 units long and then click OK. And that's how you do it. There are actually three ways to change the row height. One way, the first two ways are the same that you will do when you change the column width. You could use the Format Cells command, or you could drag the row headers the same way. However, if you change the font size of the characters that are in the cell, it will also change the row height, and that's another way of changing the row height. But there are two warnings or two concerns. The row height will not change back if you go to make the font smaller, and if you drag the row headings too small, you will not see all the text. So let's take a look at the three ways that you could change the row height. Obviously, you can choose the active cell, and then you can move the mouse pointer in between the rows so that you can click and drag to a height this way, click and drag and squash it down. Again, click and drag and stretch it up, click and drag and squash it down. And that's the way to click and drag and increase a row height. So if I type in hello and I hit enter, and now I make the row height higher, it looks like there's a whole bunch of space above the word hello. I could always push it back to the height that I feel comfortable with. Obviously, the second way to change the row height is to select the specific row by clicking the cursor into a particular cell, and then in the Home tab, in the Cells group, I click the Format command, and I click Row Height. And now I can make it a specific unit of measure. I can click Row Height, and I can make it 30 units high, and the entire row will stretch high. I can click Format Row Height, and I can make it only 15, and that's the way it would look. The third way to change the row height is simply to change the font size of any text in the cell in that particular row. If I click on cell C10 I go to the Home tab in the font group, just like in Word, click on the font size, and I make it nice and big, like 36. Notice the entire row became bigger because one particular cell has font size bigger. But now here's the thing you must be careful of. Once you change the font size, it will only adjust the row height once. Once you make the font size bigger, if you go back to the cell and make the font size smaller, it might undo it. That's true. But if you make it big and then you stretch it yourself even once, changing the font size will not change the row height after you stretched the row yourself by moving the mouse to the border between the two rows and clicking and dragging. So again, if I type in the letter G, again, I can change the font size and the row height will change accordingly every time I make it larger and every time I make it smaller. But once you stretch the row height yourself, changing the font size will not change the row height. Unless, of course, you make it so big that it has to stretch it taller. Now, mind you, if you squash a row too small or smaller than the size of the font, you will not be able to see the entire cell.